You're worthless. You have nothing. My own daughter screamed those words at me across the dinner table. The room went silent. Some of my family stared at their plates. Others shifted uncomfortably, pretending they hadn't heard. I sat there frozen, my chest tight, wondering how my own child could humiliate me like that in front of everyone. At that moment, I felt smaller than I ever had in my life. What Madison didn't know was that my late husband had left behind something she could never have imagined. And when the lawyer revealed it, her smile disappeared in an instant. If you're hooked already, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. My name is Evelyn Carter. I'm 58 years old, a widow, and a mother who has spent her entire adult life putting family first. After my husband Daniel passed away 10 years ago, everything changed. I worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on and food on the table. I never had the luxury of vacations, new clothes, or fancy things. Every spare dollar went toward raising my daughter Madison. I wanted her to have the chances I never had. Daniel and I built our life together in a modest 2-story house. It's nothing extravagant, but every wall, every creak of the floorboards carries his memory. That house is more than just a home. It's where we raised Madison, where he and I shared dreams for the future. For me, it's sacred. For her, it's just another thing she believes she's entitled to. Madison is 29 now. She's always been ambitious, but somewhere along the way, that ambition turned into greed. She became obsessed with appearances, chasing status, and showing off to everyone. She treats me as if I'm beneath her, as if the sacrifices I made for her don't matter. I tell myself she's just lost. But the cruelty in her words cuts deeper every time. It was at our family's annual holiday dinner that things finally reached a breaking point. I had worked all week preparing food, polishing the old silver Daniel's mother had given us, and setting the table with care. I wanted the evening to feel warm, the way Daniel always loved it. Our relatives arrived. My brother Henry, always kind, but too soft-spoken to step in when things got tense, and little Lily, Madison's 6-year-old daughter. Lily is sweet, gentle, and the only reason I sometimes bite my tongue when Madison lashes out. That little girl deserves peace. When Madison walked in that evening, she made an entrance as always. Expensive dress, jewelry that sparkled under the dining room light, and a boyfriend who looked around like he was measuring the place to see if it was worth his time. She smiled at everyone, but it wasn't warmth, it was pride. Pride that she thought she was better than the rest of us. I tried to keep my focus on the food and the laughter. I wanted so badly for that night to be joyful, but as I watched Madison sip her wine, smirk at my brother, and roll her eyes when I spoke, I felt the dread in my chest growing. I knew something was coming, and then it happened. Madison turned to me in front of everyone and said words I will never forget. The dinner had started out politely enough. The clinking of forks and the soft chatter of relatives filled the air, and for a short moment, I believed maybe things would go smoothly. I passed around the roast I had worked all afternoon preparing, making sure Lily got the first slice because she had been so patient waiting for everyone to arrive. Her little smile warmed my heart, and for a brief moment, I felt like maybe all the effort had been worth it. But Madison always had a way of turning even the simplest moment performance. And that night, she was in rare form. She leaned back in her chair, swirling her glass as though she was the star of some show. Her boyfriend laughed at every sharp remark she made, even when it was at someone else's expense. When Uncle Henry tried to compliment my cooking, Madison interrupted him with a smirk. "Don't encourage her, Uncle. Mom doesn't need any more excuses to think she's actually accomplished something. It's just dinner." The words were casual, tossed out like nothing, but they stung me like a slap to the face. I forced a smile and told myself to stay calm. I had learned over the years that arguing with Madison in front of others never ended well, but she wasn't finished. The conversation shifted to careers and money, and suddenly all eyes were on me. Madison set her glass down and leaned forward, her tone sharp and mocking. "Look at you, Mom. You've spent your whole life slaving away. And for what? You're nearly 60 and you've got nothing. No savings, no career, nothing to show. Honestly, it's pathetic." The table went silent. My brother lowered his eyes, clearly uncomfortable, but he didn't say a word. My heart pounded so hard, I thought everyone could hear it. I wanted to speak, to defend myself, to remind her of the nights I stayed up sewing her clothes for school because I couldn't afford new ones, of the days I went hungry so she could have seconds at dinner. But the words caught in my throat. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks as her cruel voice filled the room. Madison wasn't finished. She leaned back again, crossing her arms as if she had just delivered some grand truth. Don't act like you sacrificed for me. You chose that life. You chose to stay stuck. That's not my fault. You're just bitter because you never amounted to anything. Her boyfriend chuckled and shook his head as if he agreed. The laughter felt like knives. I looked around the table, desperate for someone, anyone, to step in. But nobody did. My relatives avoided my eyes, their faces tight with awkwardness. Even Henry, who had always been my protector growing up, kept quiet. The weight of silence pressed down on me harder than Madison's words. It felt as if the whole family had silently agreed that I was exactly what she claimed, worthless. I pushed my chair back and stood up, pretending I needed to check on something in the kitchen. My hands trembled as I gripped the counter, fighting back tears. Through the walls, I could still hear her voice carrying into the other room, laughing as she whispered something to her boyfriend. Then I heard her words clear as day. When she's gone, at least I'll finally get something out of this family. About time I get rewarded. Those words cut deeper than any insult before. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the home Daniel and I had built together, the memories we cherished, the sacrifices we made. To Madison, all of it was just a prize to be claimed when I was no longer here. My chest ached, and for a moment, I had to steady myself against the counter to keep from breaking down completely. When I finally returned to the table, I sat quietly, avoiding Madison's triumphant smirk. I kept my eyes on Lily, who was quietly nibbling at her food, too young to understand the storm around her. Her innocence reminded me of why I had endured so much, why I had stayed strong even when life tried to crush me. That little girl deserved better than the ugliness her mother carried in her heart. The rest of the evening dragged on, every word from Madison sharp and pointed, every laugh from her boyfriend like salt in an open wound. I barely tasted the food on my plate. Instead, I felt a deep heaviness, like I was carrying the weight of the entire room. When the night finally ended and the door closed behind the last guest, I sat at the table alone, staring at the empty chairs. My daughter's voice echoed in my head, each insult replaying over and over. In that silence, though, something shifted inside me. I realized I had allowed her cruelty to define me for too long. She thought she knew everything about me, about what I had or didn't have. But what she didn't know was that Daniel had left behind something that would change everything. She had mocked me, humiliated me, and dismissed my entire life as worthless. But she was about to find out just how wrong she was. After that dinner, I barely slept. Madison's words haunted me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her smirk, heard her laugh, and felt the sting of her voice telling me I was worthless. For years, I had told myself to be patient, to believe she would grow out of this selfishness, that deep down she loved me. But that night, hearing her whisper that she only cared about what she would gain when I was gone, I knew something had shifted. It wasn't just disrespect anymore. It was greed. As I sat alone in the quiet house, I thought about Daniel. He had always been the strong one, the steady hand when life grew too heavy. Before he passed, he left me with a small sealed envelope tucked away with his will. He had told me, "Evelyn, when the time comes, this will explain everything. Don't speak of it until then." At the time, I didn't fully understand, but I respected his wishes. For 10 years, I guarded that envelope in silence. That night, I realized why he had left it. He must have known Madison's heart. He must have seen the selfishness in her even when I refused to. Daniel had always been firm but fair, and while I had spoiled Madison in ways, he had warned me not to let her entitlement grow. He saw what I couldn't bring myself to admit, and now his words were my only comfort. A few days later, the call came. The lawyer, Mr. Whitaker, said it was time for the family to gather for the reading of Daniel's will. My stomach turned when I heard those words. I knew exactly how Madison would behave. She would march into that office convinced everything was hers, already planning how to spend it before the ink was dry. And part of me dreaded it, because I knew her cruelty would only get worse if she thought I stood in her way. The morning of the reading, I dressed simply, in a soft blue blouse Daniel had once said brought out my eyes. I wanted to walk into that office with quiet dignity. When I looked in the mirror before leaving, I didn't see a broken woman. I saw someone who had endured, who had fought for her family, and kept standing no matter how heavy the burden. And I promised myself, no matter what Madison said or did that day, I would not bow my head. As expected, Madison arrived late, making a grand entrance into the lawyer's office with her boyfriend trailing behind. She wore a sharp red dress and high heels that clicked against the hardwood floor, announcing her presence like a queen entering her court. She smiled at me with that same smug expression she had worn at the dinner table. "Finally, Mom," she said with a little laugh. "Maybe you'll have something to offer besides pity." I didn't respond. I simply sat still, folding my hands in my lap, letting her dig her own hole. Uncle Henry sat beside me, giving me a small, reassuring nod. Lily, thank God, had been left with a babysitter. The last thing I wanted was for that sweet child to see her mother at her worst. The room grew quiet as Mr. Whitaker entered, carrying a neat stack of documents. He was an older man with a kind face, and he greeted me warmly before adjusting his glasses and settling at the table. Madison leaned forward, practically vibrating with anticipation. "Let's get on with it," she said, her voice full of impatience. As the lawyer began to read, I felt Madison's eyes dart to me every few seconds, searching for some reaction, some hint of what was coming, but I gave her nothing. Inside, my heart pounded, but outwardly, I remained calm, because I knew something she didn't. Daniel's addendum was still waiting to be revealed. I thought back to that envelope I had held onto for a decade, sealed tightly with Daniel's handwriting on the front. I remembered the weight of it in my hand the day I had delivered it to Mr. Whitaker after Daniel's funeral. I had wanted to open it so many times, but I held strong, trusting Daniel's instructions. And now, sitting in that office, I realized this was the moment he had prepared for. Madison whispered something to her boyfriend, laughing under her breath as if she was already planning the vacations, the shopping sprees, the life of luxury she thought was moments away. Her arrogance filled the room, but instead of anger, I felt a strange peace, because I knew what was coming. This wasn't just about money or property. This was about truth, about Daniel's voice finally being heard, about setting the record straight once and for all. Madison thought she had humiliated me at that dinner. She thought she had won, but she didn't know that her father had seen through her long ago, and he had made sure his final words would speak louder than her cruelty ever could. As the lawyer cleared his throat and prepared to mention the sealed addendum, I sat taller in my chair, steady and unshaken. Madison's world was about to change, and for the first time in years, I felt a spark of strength rise inside me. The air inside the lawyer's office felt heavy, as if everyone could sense something important was about to happen. Mr. Whitaker adjusted his glasses and began reading the will with the calm, steady voice of a man who had done this 1,000 times. Madison leaned forward in her chair, her eyes sparkling with greed. I could see her practically counting the money in her. Every word from the lawyer seemed to feed her confidence, and she glanced at me every so often with that familiar smirk, the one she had worn at the dinner table when she called me worthless. At first, the will sounded exactly like Madison expected. Mr. Whitaker read aloud Daniel's opening words, his wishes for peace in the family, his gratitude for the years he had lived. Then he went into the list of personal items, his watch, his collection of vinyl records, small tokens he had wanted family members to have. Madison barely contained her impatience. She tapped her nails against the table and muttered under her breath, "Get to the good part already." Her boyfriend chuckled beside her, equally smug. Finally, the lawyer paused and said, "Now, before I continue, there is something important I need to address." Mr. Carter left an addendum to his will. It was handwritten, signed, and notarized. He requested that it be kept sealed until this day. The room grew silent. My breath caught in my throat, and I saw Madison straighten in her chair. She was practically glowing with excitement, certain that this meant even more riches were coming her way. Mr. Whitaker opened a sealed envelope and carefully unfolded the paper. His voice softened slightly, as though even he felt the weight of what he was about to read. "This is in my own words," he began, "to my beloved wife Evelyn. I leave the house we built together, all of my financial accounts, and the remainder of my estate, to ensure she is cared for and never again has to carry the weight of survival alone." I felt tears sting my eyes. After all those years of struggle, of scraping by, Daniel had made sure I would finally have security. My heart swelled with gratitude and love for him, even beyond the grave. But as I glanced at Madison, her smile faltered for the first time. She blinked rapidly, as if she had misheard. The lawyer continued, "To my granddaughter Lily, I set aside a trust fund to be released to her when she turns 18. This will provide for her education and future, and I hope it allows her the opportunities her mother once had, but did not appreciate." A small gasp echoed in the room. Madison's hands tightened on the arms of her chair, her knuckles turning white. Her eyes darted from the lawyer to me, wide with disbelief. Then came the final blow. Mr. Whitaker cleared his throat and read Daniel's last words for Madison. "To my daughter Madison, I leave you my Bible. Inside, you will find passages I highlighted and notes I wrote over the years. My prayer is that one day you will learn that true wealth is not measured in money, but in kindness, humility, and respect for those who love you. I hope you choose a different path before it is too late." The room went dead silent. Madison's face twisted in shock, then rage. She slammed her hands on the table and shouted, "This is ridiculous! I'm his only daughter. I deserve everything. He can't do this to me." Her voice cracked, trembling with fury. Her boyfriend shifted uncomfortably, clearly embarrassed, but not daring to speak. Mr. Whitaker remained calm. "Miss Carter, your father's wishes were clear, legally binding, and documented properly. There is no mistake." Madison turned on me, her eyes burning with anger. "You did this, didn't you? You poisoned him against me. You've always been jealous of me." Her words cut through the air like knives, but this time I didn't flinch. For the first time, I felt strong enough to look her in the eye and answer. "No, Madison," I said, my voice steady. "This was your father's choice. He saw the truth long before I did. He knew what mattered and what didn't, and he wanted to make sure his legacy went to those who valued love over greed." Her mouth opened as if to argue, but no words came. The smirk, the confidence, the superiority, it all crumbled. She sat back down, her face pale, her eyes darting nervously as if searching for an escape. For once, she had no power. Uncle Henry placed a hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Daniel knew your worth." "He always did." I nodded, holding back tears. Not tears of sadness this time, but of relief. Years of humiliation, of sacrifice, of being dismissed as nothing. It all dissolved in that moment. Daniel's words had restored my dignity. Madison finally stood, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Without another word, she stormed out of the office, her heels striking hard against the ground like gunshots. Her boyfriend scrambled after her, leaving behind only silence in their wake. I sat there for a long moment, letting the truth sink in. My husband had seen me, valued me, and honored me in a way my daughter never had. And in front of the very people who had once stayed silent, his voice had spoken louder than all of Madison's cruelty. The room stayed quiet long after Madison stormed out. I sat there with my hands folded on the table, my heart still racing from everything that had just unfolded. For years, I had lived under her shadow, letting her words chip away at me piece by piece, convincing myself that maybe she was right. Maybe I hadn't done enough with my life. But in that office, with Daniel's words read aloud, I realized the truth. My life had been full of sacrifice, love, and quiet strength. That was worth more than all the money or status in the world. Uncle Henry squeezed my shoulder gently, his eyes shining with a kind of relief. "Evelyn," he said softly, "you carried so much alone all these years." Daniel saw it. We all should have said something sooner. His words caught me off guard, and I felt a lump rise in my throat. For so long, the silence of others had made me feel invisible, like my pain wasn't real. But hearing Henry admit it gave me a sense of validation I didn't know I needed. Mr. Whitaker closed the folder and gave me a small smile. Your husband was a wise man. He wanted to make sure you were cared for, and he wanted his words to guide his daughter, even if she doesn't see it right now. I nodded, holding back tears. There was sadness in me, of course. No mother wants to hear her child spoken of in such a way, even when it's true. But there was also peace. For once, the burden wasn't mine to carry alone. Walking out of that office, the world felt different. The sun was brighter, the air lighter. I thought about Madison's face when she realized she would inherit nothing but a Bible and her father's words. It wasn't joy I felt at her loss, it was justice. She had treated love as worthless, but her father had shown her in the clearest way possible that true wealth lies elsewhere. Whether she learns from it or not is up to her. When I got home, Lily ran to greet me at the door, her small arms wrapping tightly around my "Grandma, are you okay?" she asked, her innocent eyes searching my face. I knelt down, brushing her hair from her forehead, and smiled. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm more than okay. This house is ours now, yours and mine, and we'll fill it with love and laughter." Her smile was brighter than the sun, and in that moment, I knew Daniel's choice had been the right. That night, as I sat in the living room with a cup of tea, I pulled out the Bible Daniel had left for Madison. It had been placed on the table by Mr. Whitaker, a symbol of everything she had refused to value. I opened it carefully, and inside were Daniel's handwritten notes, verses underlined, margins filled with thoughts about faith, kindness, and family. One note stopped me in my tracks. It read, "Evelyn has carried this family with her love. She is the richest person I know." Tears blurred my vision as I closed the book. Madison might have rejected his words, but they were mine to hold on to now. I knew Lily would one day need them too. Perhaps, when she was older, she would understand the full story and see that her grandparents had always wanted the best for her. Days turned into weeks, and Madison kept her distance. Rumors reached me through relatives that she was furious, telling anyone who would listen that I had manipulated the will. But I didn't chase her, didn't defend myself. For once, I didn't feel the need to prove anything. The truth was written in her father's hand, and that was enough. Instead, I poured my energy into creating a new chapter for Lily and me. I fixed up the garden Daniel had loved, planted roses by the front porch, and painted the old fence white. Lily helped me bake cookies in the kitchen, her giggles filling the air with the joy I had been missing for so long. Every corner of the house began to feel alive again, not weighed down by Madison's harshness, but lifted by love. I won't pretend it was easy. Some nights, I still lay awake, replaying Madison's cruel words in my mind. The hurt doesn't vanish overnight. But then I remembered Daniel's addendum, the trust fund for Lily, the way he had honored me. I remember Uncle Henry's words, Lily's hug, and the knowledge that my sacrifices had meaning. Slowly, the pain gave way to pride. The lesson I carry now is simple but powerful. Worth is not something others give you. It cannot be measured by wealth or status, or the approval of those who fail to see your heart. Worth is built through love, sacrifice, and the lives you touch along the way. Daniel saw my worth. Lily feels it every day. And now, I finally see it too. So when I think back to Madison's mocking words at that dinner table, "You're worthless. You have nothing," I no longer crumble inside. Because the truth is, I have everything I need. I have a home filled with memories, a granddaughter who loves me, and the legacy of a man who honored me with his last breath. That is more than Madison could ever take away. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from.